Hello, hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk Ray Bradbury. All right, so it's been a while, not getting these reviews done as quickly as I had in the past, but continuing on today with a story with a rather long title, so I'm going to have to read it off the screen. Today's story is the John Wilkes Booth Warner Brothers MGM NBC Funeral Train, written in 2003 and appearing in the Cat's Pajamas stories in 2004. All right, so if you're new to the show, the way this works is I do a brief synopsis of what happens in the story and just sort of, at the end, wrap up with some thoughts and feelings about what it all means to me. Is it a good story? Is it worth your time to read? And then in the end, I am trying to read all 600 or so short stories written by Bradbury in his lifetime, and this is about 225 or so into that process. All right, so a friend barges into the narrator's office just as he's about to lay down for a nap and says, haven't you heard? There's a very strange train rolling into town, the likes of which we haven't seen here in 50 years. It's an old steam engine. And he's like, we got to see this. This thing is draped in crepe paper and it's all decked out, and it's something we got to see. So they go down to the station, they watch his train pull up. And it turns out it is Abraham Lincoln's funeral train, which carried his body around the country in the process of going to Springfield for his funeral. But strapped to tied to the engine are various cars with the names of Hollywood studios on them, MGM, NBC, and so on. In one car, as they enter the train, they're sort of shocked and marveled to see that there's the old studio heads who are long since dead from these studios, but they're alive and well, and they're smoking cigars and playing cards on this train. And then they move on to the next car, which has, as you might expect in Hollywood, a train car full of lawyers sort of fighting over what to do with this whole thing and this tour and where to play and how much money to spend and all these things and how they're going to make money out of it. Moving forward in the train to the engine, they meet Elmo, who we learn has created a time travel machine out of this train, and he's sort of scooping up these figures from the past as if with a net and bringing them into the present. The narrator is, for some reason that we don't really understand, is completely enraged, and he sort of contemplates yelling fire and getting everybody off the train because this is a bad idea, he thinks. And he actually mentions, what would it be like, would this train even exist today if someone had yelled fire in the room in Ford's Theater on the night that Lincoln was shot? Would it have avoided his death? So he does yell fire, and for a moment everybody sort of leaves the train, and then when they realize nothing's bad's going on, they get back on, and the narrator asks Elmo about turning the train around, but he says there's no going back, we've just came from the past. There's some nonsense here strapped onto the end of the story about George Washington and Lafayette and John Wilkes Booth doing a speaking tour, which is really, really weird. I don't understand it. But finally, the train pulls away, and Elmo says, we'll see you next April in Springfield. Maybe you can hear it. There is a siren in the background. I'm sorry about that. Nothing I can do. Hopefully everybody is okay here in town. So I have no idea what is going on in this story. It's a train filled with dead Hollywood executives who've been brought back to the present by this person in their time machine. There is obviously some sort of an attempt at satire here going on. Something to do with the way that Hollywood sort of regurgitates things and brings them back, and sort of the past, what was old becomes new again, but it becomes a little bit more hollow, a little bit more fake, and not as good as the original. And people today, like you and me, we recognize this in Hollywood, and obviously Ray Bradbury recognized that as well, but it's not entirely clear the way it's done, what he means, and what his real message is here. The whole story does not quite come together in a way that you would think. That said, Bradbury did work in Hollywood a lot. He spent a lot of his life living in the LA area. A lot of his material was turned into scripts for TV shows and movies. He wrote some scripts for some movies. Famously, he spent time in Dublin writing the adaptation of Moby Dick. So no doubt he had a lot of dealings with these people, and I don't think that it's a stretch to say or to guess that he was not happy with the situation and sort of growing older in life. I've seen some interviews of him where he sort of talks about sort of creativity and sometimes a lot of the nonsense that things were becoming. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that there's some autobiographical element here. That's not always the case in fiction, but with Bradbury, there's usually some sort of autobiographical basis in a lot of his, at least his non-science fiction stories. This one is slightly science fiction, but it's pretty grounded as well. In the end, it is fun. It is a fast story. It won't take you long to read at all. It's frenetic. It feels like the characters are talking a mile a minute, although you are in complete control of how fast you read the story. I think you're going to end up reading it really, really fast because it just feels like it deserves to be read fast. In that sense, it feels very much like Bradbury, but there's a reason why some of these stories have been forgotten, and I think this one probably deserves to be a little bit forgotten. But me, I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm trying to read all 600 Ray Bradbury short stories and discuss them here with you, so I'm going to read it again, and hopefully I understand it more the second time, but we shall see. All right, then. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Hope it helps you perhaps a little bit. I don't know. But we will be back next time, probably next weekend, with A Careful Man Dies, which is an older story from 1946, but I don't think it was published until this collection. Seems to be the way of things is that there's a lot of newer stories in this collection, but also a few that were pulled from the dust pile that were not previously published back in the day. So there you have it. Next time, A Careful Man Dies, 1946, but this time it was the John Wilkes Booth, Warner Brothers, MGM, NBC Funeral Train from 2003. Thank you, and I'll see you again soon. Oh, and happy Halloween. It's almost that day. Enjoy the holiday. See you later.